Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Fresh Brewed Kentucky Politics. But that's not the only thing that's fresh around here. Check out that fresh haircut. Ooh, just got a few hours ago. That's a good-looking haircut. Got a lot of important stuff coming up over the weekend. We got the Liberty Luncheon tomorrow. If you've not purchased tickets, don't come. They're sold out, too. And I will not let you in at the door because we only had so much space. That's why we sold tickets. So they're all sold out, all 100. We started off with only 50. That sold out in like 3 days. So we lifted it to 100, and that sold out like 5-6 days ago. So don't come on by if you haven't bought a ticket, because I don't have space for you. Additionally, guys, I would love for you to do me a favor. Go ahead and hit that share button down there in the corner. It's right down there. So if you move your mouse to the right or your finger to the right, and it's right there on the right side underneath. There you go. Yep, just go ahead and hit that share button right there. Thank you guys for hitting that for me. And I thank you for joining me. Today we're going to talk about, of course, big breaking story with the unemployment debacle going on, the unemployment issue, scandal of sorts. Probably not the last. We're going to talk a little bit about the data that we're seeing. The data he's tracking, some people started pointing this out to me, and it's worth talking about too as well. It's definitely worth talking about this data, and I'm seeing some confusing things in this data he's throwing out there. I'm also getting some confusing messages from Beshear on where we're at with vaccines too as well. He keeps changing up the number on us, and I'm going to talk about that. Beshear did a pretty sizable interview with a couple different news outlets where he talks about what he learned from the COVID pandemic. And we'll be talking about that. And finally, let's talk about the cops. We'll talk about the cops real quick. We'll talk about some of the stuff that we're seeing. Talk about some of the controversy we're seeing there around the nation. We'll have a discussion of sorts. So I thank you guys for joining me. Once again, hit the share button. Let's dig into it. So we've got state workers that were gaming the unemployment system. So what was going on here? Well, state workers who did not lose their job and were not eligible for unemployment filed for and received unemployment benefits. Now, this always would be bad for somebody to receive unemployment benefits, especially government workers on their own, because for those who don't know, that the employer pays the unemployment. So like I employ people, and a percentage, and for me I think it's around 3%, 4% of everybody's pay, what I pay out in payroll. So if I pay $100 in payroll, I pay $4 to unemployment, and then that goes into the unemployment fund. And when that goes into the unemployment fund and then somebody files for unemployment, that gets drawn out against my fund total, and that's where they pull their money from. So as I just said, the employer is the one who's paying for it. So when you have government employees pulling unemployment, they're only pulling it from unemployment that's paid into by government money. And remember, government gets its money from one place, from you, the taxpayer. So already, if this wasn't COVID time, this would be so ridiculously terrible, mainly because of the fact that, well, that is taxpayer dollars that they are defrauding the system for. Now, what makes it worse is during this COVID time is there were so many people that were going without their unemployment claims being filled, the phone calls. Of course, we always remember that they had tons of those emails, 400,000 emails that went unanswered, completely unanswered, unopened into the unemployment office. And so that throws a lot of salt in this wound of government workers. But to cap it all off, it turns out the majority of these workers that were gaming the system actually worked for the unemployment office itself. They actually worked for the unemployment department, unemployment insurance, and which to me, I'm like, okay, so you have government workers gaming the system while we have people going hungry that did really lose their jobs and losing their houses and losing money, all because you have a government entity, you have a governor that came in and decided you are not valuable enough to keep your job. Your job isn't essential enough, in my opinion. So I'm going to take you off of it, and we'll throw you on this unemployment system, which you'll never get paid out from. But while you're not getting paid out from it, we'll have unemployment workers that are supposed to be doing your claim actually defrauding the system, filling out their own claims and paying themselves tens of thousands of dollars at your expense. That is ridiculous. But I tell you this much, and you can say, things happen and all these other things. And I hear you. You have employees, but I can tell you this much right here. When a customer comes into my shop, my coffee shop, and has a bad experience, you know who they talk to? They talk to me. You know who they blame? They blame Brood. They don't blame that employee. They blame Brood. Right, wrong, or indifferent, right? And there's something different, too. Let's take a moment to understand that Governor Beshear may not be accountable for what goes on in the unemployment office because he doesn't directly oversee it. But he is, however, responsible for it. Okay? I'm sorry. He may not be responsible for what goes on in that office, but he's accountable for it. Those are his people that he has hired that then hired these people. And that leaves you to wonder, what kind of person are we hiring? This isn't one or two people. We're talking about 19 workers, the majority of which worked in unemployment. What kind of POSs is this POS governor hiring? I mean, I guess birds of a feather flock together. And if you're going to have people that don't care about others, and I'm sorry, you don't care about others. You want to sit there and tell us, oh, well, you guys are selfish because you don't want to take a vaccine, or you think people should have freedom of choice and everything else. Literally, you're being paid to do a job that your employer has forced people into a position where they need you to do your job, and you don't even just not care. You then, meanwhile, are lining your own pockets. And I tell you this much right here. All 19 should be absolutely prosecuted for fraud. They should be prosecuted for a litany of charges, and I think they should be personally liable to every single individual that did not get their unemployment claim filled. Because while you were not getting your unemployment claim covered and taken care of, well, you were not. They had no problem getting their own claims covered when they weren't supposed to. They should be personally liable for that. That is fraudulent duties. You can say you did not do your job well, but of course, it makes sense. I mean, let's look at the unemployment department, okay? They have had, I believe, 3 data breaches over the last year. 3. The first one occurred at the beginning of the pandemic, and they didn't even report it. It actually took the Attorney General finding out about it and telling Beshear, you need to report this, for then Beshear to finally report it weeks after he should have reported to begin with. There's a federal law that says when you have a data breach, you have to report it within X number of days. And he broke that. He didn't even come out and say it. Didn't even come out and say it. So don't sit there and pretend like, well, Andy's doing the best he can. He runs and he hides from accountability. He runs and hides from it. And you can see that when he didn't come out and admit to the data breach that first occurred. Now they've had like 2 or 3 more. They had this most recent one that caused a shutdown where people are literally getting their entire Social Security numbers taken. Remember, if that happens to you to a private company, you get sued for that. So imagine there's somebody out there who was working a job that then the governor came along and said, you don't get to work that job anymore. And don't sit there and tell me it's COVID. Don't sit there and tell me it was science. Not when we just had in our last episode, Chris Weiss talking about how Dr. Stacks himself admitted that scientifically there was no science behind exactly what was closing and what wasn't, but it was rather value judgments made by the governor of what was important and what wasn't. So governor decides you're not important. This is somebody out there this happened to. You're not important. You didn't file for unemployment, and you don't get paid it. And remember, a lot of people, too, as well, aren't getting that extra government money that they were owed, that they should have gotten, those extra federal kickers that they should have gotten if their claim was properly processed, because the claim wasn't processed in time, costing them thousands upon thousands of dollars that they would have normally received. So our failures literally cost unemployed people additional thousands of dollars. But anyways, his failure, not ours. So you have somebody out there who got kicked out of his job because of the jerk governor that then doesn't get his claim fulfilled in time, while the jerk governor's employees are filling their own claims for their own buddies or themselves. Remember, Lieutenant Governor Coleman's hairdresser had no problem getting her claim covered. In fact, Lieutenant Governor Coleman made sure it got taken care of herself. And then you also have 3 data breaches going on. So this one person, at least one, has not had their claim filled, lost their job, and now probably has had their identity stolen. And meanwhile, we have the governor breaking federal law, not reporting these data breaches because he didn't want to own up to it, to give people the ability to watch their stuff better and alert things and lock down things, even maybe purchase identity theft protection real quick because the governor failed to let them know in the legal, timely manner. Once again, a failure of the governor, running from accountability. A failure as you continue to have data breaches. And then you also have, now, fraudulent UI department fulfilling their own claims while not fulfilling others. And there's a little more to this than that. I wish I could go into more details about some things, but certain people out there know there's more to this story. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens as this story continues. I tell you this much, there's a reason why Coleman probably ain't going to be the lieutenant governor when Beshear runs again. I'm going to tell you that much right now. There's a lot more there. But more importantly, why can't they get it right? Why can't Beshear get this right? It has been over a year. Over a year. Why can't he get it right? Now, you'll hear the Democrats say, well, it's Bevin's fault and this computer program issue and everything. No. That doesn't make up for a lack of morals within your own department. That doesn't make up for the kinds of people that would defraud their employer, their government, the government, while also failing to fulfill what they need to do. What they need to do for the people that you've kicked out of a job. It is a issue of values. He does not care. He does not care about you. Do not let him for 1 second pretend he cares about you. He doesn't give 2 pennies about you, because if he did, he wouldn't hire people like this. If he did, unemployment would be fixed by now. He would care enough to handle it. It's still under Lieutenant Governor Coleman. If he really cared, he would sit there and say, I'm going to take over unemployment myself. This is a problem that needs to be fixed. This is the most pressing issue. I have failed you, and now I'm going to get it right, and I'm going to fix it. But he won't do it. In fact, the legislators offered him 100 employees to help with unemployment. The legislators offered him in 2020 100 employees to help with the unemployment. He turned them down. I offered him 100 volunteers to help with unemployment. I had 100 people step up saying they're willing to donate at least 20 hours a week to help the unemployment system get fixed. He didn't take their help. He doesn't care. He doesn't care because it doesn't matter to him. He kicked you out of your job. You're probably not going to vote for him anyways, and he knows that. Why would he care what happens to you? And then he'll sit there and look at you and be like, oh gosh, I care so much. I just care so much as I have frauds and criminals and some of the worst people in the world running the most important department right now in my executive branch, the unemployment office. You say, why is that the most important one right now? Well, what's the most pressing issue right now? Is it really COVID right now? Or is it, I don't know, the unemployment debacle that you have let continue? How many lives is that affecting? Far more than COVID is right now. But like I said, he only cares, he only tracks, he only does what he cares about. And you can see this too. Do me a favor. If you're listening to this on the computer, if you're on your phone or you're driving or you're listening to the podcast, it's available. Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts. You're listening to this on Facebook Live right now. You don't have to necessarily do this, but at some point, Google the COVID-19 dashboard. I'm going to tell you where it sits today. We've had a total of 435,743 positive cases. We've tested 5,226,260. We've had 6,302 deaths. Our current positivity rate is 3.45%. But when you look at recovered, you see we only have 50,642 people recovered. Now, are you telling me, Governor, are you telling me the state of Kentucky that right now, I thought this is disease only, like, you're only in it for like maybe a month tops, right? I thought you recover after like a month or two. I mean, there's tons of people who've had it and they've gotten, I mean, I've talked to them that have had it, gotten over it, right? But you mean to tell me that of 435,000 cases, only 50,000 of them have recovered at this point? Only 50,000 of them have recovered at this point. Are you telling me that? Because if I go to the daily report and I look at, oh, okay, well, let's see here. Who's in the hospital right now? I say, okay, let's see who's in the hospital. Let's see here. Okay, ICU beds. Okay, number available. All right. Okay. We only have about 600 in the hospital right now. 600 in the hospital right now. 600 people. So I ask you, what has happened to these other people? What has happened with the, I don't know, 380,000 COVID people who've had COVID? Did they recover? Did they die? What happened with them? Because right now you have 50,000 of them, 642 recovered. Why aren't you tracking that? Oh, I know. I know why. Because it's something you don't care about. You don't care. He doesn't care about who recovers from COVID. If he really cared about you or me, he'd be tracking that stat. That's an important stat. It's an important thing to understand. But instead, he doesn't track it. It's not important. And nobody even asks him about it. I don't see anybody asking him, Governor, what has happened to 380,000 people? Because you only have 600 in the hospital, ICU, things like that. Do you just assume they recovered and then you don't add them in? I mean, if that's the case, could we get at least a probable recovered rate? I mean, you have, out of our 435,000 cases, you have 105,000 probable. Out of our 6,302 deaths, you have 601 probable. Can I get some probably recovered, please? But no, that doesn't fit the narrative he's pushing for. The narrative he's pushing for is you have a problem that is not my fault. COVID's not his fault. And I need to fix it for you to distract you from all the problems that are my fault, like unemployment insurance, that I am not fixing for you. And I'm sorry, it takes a special kind of person to sit there and think this is okay. But yet there'll people who sit there. They'll literally be like, yeah, you've run one of the most fraudulent. I mean, look at the Harmon auditor's report on unemployment. They broke federal law like 3 times with how they operated their unemployment system during all this. 3 times. That's just the kind of person it is. Let's just do whatever we need to do. We don't care if we're breaking the law. We don't care. We're just going to get it done. We're just going to pretend we'll sweep it under the rug, whatever. So with all that, Beshear recently did an interview with a couple different outlets. I'm reading the article in the AP, is the one I read. AP News. Interview, Kentucky governor sees useful lessons in the pandemic. Now, what I think the useful lesson he should have learned is, hey, I should learn how to communicate better with people. I mean, you had the governor of Indiana coming out there when Beshear was complaining about his mask mandate being lifted. The governor of Indiana coming out in the news saying, Governor Beshear, you have my phone number. Just give me a call and talk to me. But of course, he's not going to sit there and say, I learned that I should communicate better with everyone. No, that's not what I learned. In fact, You know what he's going to tell you he learned? Here's what he's going to tell you he learned. Beshear, I'm reading now from the article. Beshear, who faced protest lawsuits and impeachment petitions over his virus-related executive actions, criticized the role of out-of-control social media platforms in promoting sensationalism that in turn grabbed headlines during the pandemic. This is what he complained. This is what he learned. Okay, this is what he complained about in this interview. He complained about us. He complained about you guys out there being active on social media and communicating with each other. And then he blamed the media for bothering to pick up those headlines because, of course, they're not in there. And then he follows up by saying those social media sites can make a small group appear a lot larger than it is. Don't know about that one, bud. Don't know about that one. Because there's real tangible things that a lot of these groups have done. Not just talking about ourselves. I'm talking about a lot of these different Facebook groups that have resulted in tangible numbers showing up somewhere doing something that shows it's not just a bunch of people talking on Facebook. I mean, look, our coffee shop is pretty well known in the area, and you either love it or you hate it, and we're still surviving. So clearly, it's not that small amount of people. But, I continue. Beshear's faced steady criticism and occasional protests over his actions. Armed protesters gathered near the governor's home last year. See, they never tell you that the governor's home is at the Capitol, of course, when they're doing these things. His home is right across from the Capitol. Like, somebody commented on Facebook the other day and was like, you guys should just go protest at the Capitol. Why are you protesting at his house? They're they're like across the street. You walk to them. The governor's home used to be open for tours. But anyways, we continue. Continue down on here. But, as he's talking about these small groups, I love it when he says, and this is the peach in here. He goes, I can't tell you how many times somebody's come up to me and said, I didn't vote for you and I don't apologize for it, but you've done a good job and I appreciate it. I get more of those every day than we see people at a protest. Who's telling you this, Governor? I want names. You know why I want names? Because I thought the government offices were closed to visitors. In fact, I couldn't go visit my legislators at the Capitol because they were closed due to COVID. I thought you were social distancing. I thought you were staying away from strangers. Who's coming up to you every day? Because they aren't following your guidelines. After they say, hey, you're handling it great, do you turn around and say, hey, you shouldn't be out like this. Hey, get 6 feet away from me. Hey, what are you doing in this building that I closed to visitors? Right? I mean, that should be the real question we're asking here. I've got a lot of questions. And you know what? I think it's possible, very possible, that doesn't happen. What do you guys think? Do you guys think it's possible that exactly like nobody comes up to him and says, you've done a great job and I appreciate it? I see more of those every day than we ever see people at a protest. Okay, so our protest on Wednesday had 300 people at it. So Governor Beshear, are you telling me that you've had 300 people in a day? Because remember, he said, I get more of those every day than we see people at a protest. That was his words. So Governor, real quick, are you saying you see more than 300 people a day that come up to you and say the words, I didn't vote for you. I'm not sorry I didn't, but you've done a good job and I appreciate it. You're going to tell me that right now? Like, I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. I'll take things that never happened for 1,000. That never has happened. But of course, he's going to talk about that and he's going to convince himself. Now, maybe he's talking about his followers on Facebook, right? Maybe he's talking about, they're not coming up to him, but maybe they're saying on Facebook, on his post, hey, Governor, while I didn't vote for you, I appreciate how you're handling it. It's possible he's talking about that, but I'd like to remind him that a supposedly wise man once said to me that, you got to be careful here with these out-of-control social media sites that sensationalize things and make small groups appear a lot bigger than they are. Somebody said that to me once. I forget who it was. I feel like it's just a few minutes ago, but I feel like if you're reading comments off of Facebook, Beshear, perhaps they seem like more than they are because somebody told me that can happen, but who knows? Regardless, we're going to gather Sunday at 2 p.m. again to stand up against the vaccine mandate, and that's what it is. It's a vaccine mandate. It is. I don't have any other words for you on that. It's a vaccine mandate. Now, we've seen a lot of this back and forth on Facebook about it's not a vaccine mandate. He's not mandating you get one. Okay, true. He's not mandating I get one. But let me throw a hypothetical at you. Let's say I'm in a room of 10 people. And let's say a man walks in, I don't know, we'll call him Beshear. And he says, hey, there's 10 of you in this room. 7 of you have to put this thing in you. I'm going to tell you the vaccine. It came out 6 months ago. There's some data on it. Says it's maybe safe. It does have a chance of side effects. But, you can take this. And also, hey, if you take it and something bad happens, nobody's liable for it. Nobody's going to pay your medical bills. But I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put that down here. Okay. Now, 7 out of 10 of you have to take that before I'll let you out of this room. Does that sound like a vaccine mandate to you? Does that sound like he's mandating under threat of something that people do something that he wants them to do? Does that sound like a mandate? It does to me, especially when you look at how that is enforced. A lot of people say he's not mandating you get it. Just, he doesn't lift the lockdowns. Okay, well, what happens if you serve a beer past 12? Okay, so let's say you're a bar and you serve a beer past 12 and you get caught doing it. Well, ABC comes in and they take away your ABC license. And if you're a bar and you lose your ABC license, you're not exactly a bar anymore unless, of course, you go ahead and start to sell again. So let's say you go ahead and sell without having an ABC license. Well, if you go ahead and sell without having an ABC license, eventually men with guns are going to come in there and arrest you for doing that. So you can't tell me it's not a vaccine mandate when the repercussions for not following these other mandates is men with guns eventually will arrest you. That's eventually what has to happen. Because at the end of every single law is a gun. And that goes into what I want to talk about our next topic here. So first off, that is a vaccine mandate. But going into our next topic, let's talk about these police interactions. We're seeing a lot of these. Of course, we have the George Floyd case going on in Minnesota, while at the same time, we have this terrible incident where a woman has police woman supposedly accidentally shot a man. We have an issue occurring here in Lexington where while running for police, an individual was accidentally hit by a Lexington police officer. And so, let's communicate. I want to take a second to talk about all this, right? And I think one of the things is the left is doing quite, once again, a terrible thing in their quest to have the conversation they want to have, the conversation that is about race, which I don't think for one second, that any of these instances had to do with the person's race that I just covered. Now, I'm not saying there's not actions that occur by police that have nothing to do with race. I'm sure sometimes there are. I'm sure there are racist people. There's terrible people. Like I said, there's a terrible governor that hires people that defraud individuals on unemployment and then just doesn't care about it. I mean, there's people like that out in the world, so of course there's probably racist people. And I'm not saying they don't become cops, and I'm not saying that doesn't occur. But the issue is first, let's remove race out of the equation. Now, what I think we should have a conversation about is a realization over which laws. I think we need to take a second to talk about policing policies would be a lot better here. I think even look at the Breonna Taylor situation. What we're talking about is policing policies. And, and one of the things is, real quick, I want to pause. There's somebody in the comments that just said, the conversation date. If you're going to run from the police officer or get bad and not follow the laws, you deserve to be shot. That is the problem. See, this is why we can't have this conversation, because that statement right there isn't helping anything. And not only is that not helping anything, but as well, remember, you're not guilty just because the police came and talked to you. Now, we should be interacting with police a lot better. And I completely 100% agree that you need to comply with officers. And you need to comply with officers because bad things happen in these instances if you don't. And I do suggest you comply with officers and you have your day in court. But at the same time, I think we should have a conversation about what do we want officers really enforcing. Because the problem is a lot of these policies we're having officers do is not what even officers got into policing to do. They want to solve crime, real crimes. Not, is your tint too dark on your car? Not, was he going 10 over the speed limit? They don't want to be doing those things. And let's rewind here, okay? That when these mandates, I'm talking about these mandates being put in place, at some point, because we've created a law, at some point, it'll leave it open for the police officer, possibly men with guns, to come in and enforce those laws we don't agree with. So what the real conversation I think we're missing, that we can both be having on either sides of the aisle, is about, hey, why don't we, one, take away and reform our criminal system as far as these laws that don't really do anything? Do you really want a situation to occur? Because accidents happen. We've seen that. Accidents happen. Bad things happen. Bad things happen when it's not even your fault. I mean, there's plenty of instances that have gone on around the country of individuals who police got a little jumpy with. I know of a couple in particular involving actually a white guy in a hotel that was laying on the ground, complying, and then out of nowhere gets shot. It wasn't a giant story, but the video's horrific. So we have to remember that can happen. And in remembering that, why don't we take a good hard look at the laws and say, is this really a law that we want to end up being like this? What do I mean by that? We should return to laws that deal with our major rights: life, liberty, and property. Instead of having 20 officers out there trying to figure out how to catch people for speeding, what we should have is 20 officers out there trying to find people who have stolen from other individuals. Actual crimes that have actual victims that are well known. We should have officers out there dealing with situations and individuals who in turn who are committing these major crimes. And in turn, we need to have a court system then that when you commit these major crimes, you don't just get let off easily. A court system that says, okay, you've been convicted of a crime, convicted of theft. You're not just going to get out again in several months. I mean, I know personally of a lot of people that get arrested and end up getting out a few months later and then continue to commit crimes. And I think that's the real issue we could be having a conversation about. How do we make a safer community? By getting criminals off the streets, by making sure we have crime, by making sure the laws we have on the books are the real laws we really want to enforce, such as stealing of your property, your liberty. Of course, I'd rather my police be enforcing my right to liberty, right? I think everybody would be. And enforcing your right to life. And I think a lot of these other laws out there, you have a hard time getting to that point. And I know that's not a super popular stance all the time, and we can disagree on this. But I think a lot of the current policing policies don't respect our constitutional rights. And like I mentioned earlier, that comment about, well, if you're a criminal dealing with police, you deserve to get shot. Well, hold on. We have a constitutional right to have a trial. You can't just assume that person's a criminal because they're interacting with police. You're not valuing that person's constitutional rights. And we cannot stand here and say we have a constitutional right to our property, to run my business how I want to. I have a constitutional right to bear arms. I have a constitutional right to all these other issues and all these other things, while not also protecting your constitutional rights to due process, your constitutional rights to a legal search and seizure, your constitutional rights to be properly represented in court. Those are all constitutional rights too, and we can't forget that. I'm not going to pretend to know what the answer is with this issue. I tell you what's not the answer. It's not the answer to hyper-racialize it and make it about race when it's just quite clearly not. And it doesn't actually solve any problems. And I think that's the issue overall, is what we're talking about here when we talk about is that cop racist or not. It doesn't solve the problem. It just doesn't do it. Like I said, you disagree, and that can sound like an incomplete thought, but I just thought I'd talk about it because I don't know. I think we need to remain consistent and principled. That when we believe in a constitutional right, we believe in it. And that includes your constitutional rights that protect you. Because I know a lot of people that have never done anything wrong. They've had the police come out and interact with them. I know a lot of people who've, let's talk about civil asset forfeiture real quick. For you people who don't know what that is, that's where the government can just take things from you if they think, if you have money on you and they just, whatever, they can just take it from you without going to court because they say that they think that's ill-gotten gains. And then you have to prove the money is not ill-gotten gains in order to get the money back. That's not innocent until proven guilty. That's a disrespect of a person's constitutional rights. That is bad policing policy. I don't blame the cops. I blame this bad policing policy of the government that continues to trample all over our constitutional rights. And it's that same thought process that says the government can trample all over constitutional rights that has led to us to be where we are now. That has led to us to be at a point where we have a governor that can pick and choose who's essential, that can mandate vaccines, that can say you can't have a beer past 12, and everybody just says, hey, that's okay. That's okay. And I think that is a thought process we have to get rid of. But hey, what do I know? What do I know? I could be wrong. Could be wrong. I don't know. Let me know how you feel. Send me some messages. I'm open to talking about it. Let's have a discussion. Send me some messages about what do you think? What do you think the issue with policing is in this country? Let's have a conversation on it. Well, I'll leave you there, guys. Please stop by Brood and support us. Come on out Sunday at 2 o'clock. We're going to be protesting these here mandates. Feel free to buy from us online at broodco.com, BREWEDCO.com. You can also donate to us at donate.broodco.com. I also encourage you to please share this with your friends and family. Thank you so much.